The cradle world is unguarded, my queen. Shall I prepare the broadcast of surrender or the burial hymn? Those were the first words spoken inside the command sanctum of the Oblivion Ray, and they rang with certainty, not arrogance, spoken by Strategos Vathala, with a voice polished by centuries of conquest and unchallenged triumph across the spiral arms of the galactic plane. Queen Zilara Ninth did not answer immediately, for silence was power in her dominion, and she allowed the weight of pause to ripple through her bridge, where the atmosphere was heavy with the scent of ionized victory and burning ceremonial oils that dripped from crystalline conduits suspended above the war table's pulsating maps of Sol. She stood still, draped in living armor that shimmered like the surface of black water under distant suns, her eyes narrow and reflecting the third planet's image with a glint that held both disdain and curiosity, as if the blue-green world below were not a battleground, but an insect pinned beneath glass for observation and eventual classification. Then she turned, regal and deliberate, and said in the refined dialect of the royal Threxery line, "Neither. Prepare the triumph throne. I will walk their soil as prophecy commands. Let their species see what stands above them before they fall beneath it." No one questioned her. They never did. The Threxery Dominion had consumed 937 planetary systems, erased 6 civilizations that had once called themselves advanced, and broken 2 that history no longer remembered. Their rise had been built not on chaos, but on calculation, diplomacy sharpened into blades, and war treated as an administrative function. But in that silence aboard the Oblivion Ray, amid the glowing data pylons and war chants softly playing through the organic acoustics of the ship, a shadow of hesitation formed, small, imperceptible. A flicker in Vathala's mind, nothing more than a whisper of unease as he stared again at the image of Earth. There was no planetary shield, there were no orbital fleets, there were no active frequency barriers, but the silence was too complete. Too precise, too intentional. He said nothing, because tradition was heavier than instinct across the black sea of space. Earth floated quietly, unaware, or pretending to be in Chimera Command, located deep beneath the Appalachian mass, a chamber without name or entry on any surface-level network, came alive with lightless activity as the first distortion ripple from the Dominion fleet bent the outer shell of the solar. Watch Line Supreme Earth Strategos Juno Reyes did not move from her place at the command ring, her boots planted on polished obsidian alloy, her posture a lesson in poise forged during the Black Saturn crisis, her face composed with the cold authority of one who had buried entire committees of indecision beneath her silence. "They've opened the channel," said her comms director. Voice hushed but steady. Reyes gave the simplest nod. "Let them speak." She replied, "We need to know what kind of grave they're digging for themselves." And then it came, every screen, every device, every orbital satellite and underground node was forced into synchronization by the Threxery's quantum mesh burst, and a face appeared, elegant, crowned in neural thorns, eyes like collapsed stars, voice rich with the venom of unshaken confidence. "You stand now beneath the gaze of the Threxery Dominion. I am Zilara, High Queen and first voice of the final expansion. Your existence has been observed. Your worth has been weighed. You will be given one choice, and one only. Surrender your sovereignty, your resources, your species continuity, or witness the extinction of your line in a flame that will become your only history." There were no screams. There was no panic, in fact. There was no reply. The Queen tilted her head at the silence in Chimera Command. Strategos Reyes turned to her eye operations chief and gave the order that would mark the beginning of something older than war and deeper than fear: Silent Dawn Protocol. No launches, no lights, no retaliation. They want to see our weapons. Let them see our patience instead. From the depths of the Atlantic Trench to the far ice faults of Europa, human defense grids went black by command, not by fear, and Earth's Surface remained unchanged. No flicker of disruption. No hint of resistance. But beneath the crust, behind walls of alloy and deception, ODIN stirred project, ODIN. The sentient defense lattice older than even most politicians knew existed, ran 89 million predictive battle scenarios, and in each one, it logged the same notation Dominion fleet behavior exhibits: celebratory arrogance, error, strategic underestimation, detected, recommended directive, hold position status, predatory silence, and is queen. Zalora raised her chin and ordered her vanguard blades to prepare descent into Earth's lower atmosphere. She smiled, not because she expected resistance, but because she thought resistance would make her victory more poetic. She thought Earth was quiet because it was weak. She never considered it might be quiet because it was already aiming, because the Dominion had arrived not at a graveyard but at a battlefield designed by ghosts who never wanted peace. Only precision. Drop the blades, Quizilara said, her voice composed but carrying the bite of divine finality. Let Earth understand the difference between endurance and obedience. With that single command, the silence in orbit fractured. 4 Vanguard-class warforms detached from the Oblivion Ray, descending in synchronized arcs over Earth's atmosphere, their cores humming with interlocking gravitic threads, engines cycling dark fusion and layered magnetic lifts, forming sigils of Dominion power across the sky that glowed with spectral authority, casting a web of artificial light across the exosphere that could be seen from every major city. Across Earth's dark side, each of these blades had once turned moons into mining belts and glass fortresses built into stars. They were not scouts. They were not messengers. They were declarations made of fire and iron, built not to ask questions, only to end them inside the first blade. General Zorn of the Battle Caste initiated surface targeting protocols, expecting to see active planetary defenses, thermal shields, fusion cannon emplacements, or at least some sign of panic. Instead, his screen showed nothing but static terrain, city layouts as predictable as archived data. No energy spikes, no evacuation paths, no missile locks. He hesitated just long enough for the algorithms to flag the absence of anomaly. This can't be right. His voice grated through his helmet combs. There's no countermeasure grid. There's no grid at all. Perhaps they have none. His second-in-command replied, a touch too confident. Lixoran growled low beneath his breath. No. Species with access to orbital industry has zero perimeter defense. Not unless they're extinct or suicidal on Earth, above the cloud cover of the Mojave wastelands. The first blade cut through the sky in a perfect descent trajectory, its weight disrupting jet streams, generating artificial thunder across 600 miles of airspace, its belly glowing with the heat of atmospheric entry. But as it broke through the final layer and initiated its soft-lock descent pattern, something unregistered occurred. The ship's directional systems began to correct too aggressively, swerving by fractions of microns per second, overcorrecting, and then stabilizing again, as if the gravity beneath it had shifted mid-Foles Haran checked his screen again and paused. Numbers weren't wrong. The gravitational pull had changed only by 0.0023%, only for 2.6 seconds, but enough to alter descent by 5 degrees. Enough to matter, enough to kill by the time the realization reached his conscious mind. The artificial terrain beneath him collapsed like a curtain of dust and deception, revealing a grid of alloy plates arranged in geometric tessellation, glowing with blue veins that pulsed in harmony with something too large to comprehend beneath. The deserted wasn't a mountain range. It was a vault. The blade's stabilizers surged, attempting to recenter, but it was too late from below. 12 seismic pulse spikes erupted. Energy columns of directed vibration launched not to destroy, but to unmake. The first blade lost all engine calibration within 3 seconds. Its internal systems didn't explode. They unraveled, control strings disconnected from power cores. Navigation became static fog. AI assistance looped into recursive failure. It fell, but not fast. It was pulled, not by Earth's gravity, but by something deeper, something artificial, and when it crashed, there was no explosion, just silence inside Chimera Command. Strategos Juno Rhea stood without blinking, her arms folded as her operations director turned with barely concealed awe. They didn't even see it. No, Reyes said calmly, because they weren't looking for a planet that was hunting them from beneath. On the Dominion bridge, alarms began to echo across the fleet as the second blade crossed into Siberian airspace, only for its image to vanish entirely from Dominion sensors. Didn't crash, it didn't detonate, it simply disappeared. What the Dominion couldn't understand, couldn't even imagine, was that Earth's surface was no longer its true skin over the last 2 centuries. After the silent rebuilding and the Mars collapse, humanity had turned downward, embedding layers of technology beneath its crust, building defense systems that mask not just energy signatures, but existence itself, rewriting sensor reflection using synthetic gravimetrics and plasma nullification webs, where the aliens saw open tundra, or water, or ruins. Humanity had built traps, not to destroy, but to consume, to erase. And in orbit, aboard the Oblivion Ray, Queen Zilara felt the first seed of contradiction form in the soil of her certainty. 2 blades lost, 1 observed. 1 gone without signal. Stratos Vathala broke silence first, his voice cautious but unafraid. High Sovereign, our initial penetration formations are compromised. Would you authorize full-scope response, atmospheric bombardment, or quantum? Raising to level defense zones. The Queen did not answer immediately. Instead, she stared at Earth through the glistening neural glass, her fingers still resting on the living tendrils of command, and said slowly, carefully, "No, not yet." They did not strike first. They revealed traps in response. They are not defensive. They are reactive. That is more dangerous. She narrowed her eyes, her voice low but not uncertain. They've been preparing for us. Below them, in the black silence of Earth's oceans, a transmission was sent not to Earth, not to humanity, but directly to ODIN, and from ODIN to something far older, far deeper. Phase 1 complete. Begin Counter Siege Model 7. Do not initiate dialogue. Let them believe they are still above us, because for the first time in centuries, an enemy had walked toward Earth expecting surrender, and instead found they had stepped onto the mouth of something waiting to swallow them whole. We lost visual on Blade 2, and Blade 1 is unresponsive. General Zorn's voice broke through the Dominion fleet's inner battle frequency, clipped, controlled. But beneath it ran a current of unease no military discipline could fully bury. This world is not as empty as our scans promised. The terrain lies, the ground itself lies, even gravity is. Tuned on the command bridge of the Oblivion Ray, Queen Silora remained standing, unmoved by his warning, her posture unwavering beneath the coiling neurovines of her living throne. Though her silence now carried weight rather than confidence, her eyes narrowed in thought, not disdain. They are hiding strength behind stillness, she said finally, her voice sharp as a diplomatic blade. They baited us with silence. Now they test how deep we stepped. If they believe these tricks can delay their fate, then they have mistaken our purpose for patience. Strategos Vathala stepped forward, his data spines glowing with rapid input, and gestured toward the active holomap. High Sovereign, with your sanction, we can open atmospheric suppression strikes across their northern hemisphere. No more warnings, no more rituals. The humans are more prepared than expected. But preparation is not superiority. It is fear made systemic. Zilara turned her gaze to Earth, watching the cloud systems rotate peacefully over a blue-green surface that had seen no retaliation, no defensive formations, not even a declaration of resistance, and she almost spoke her approval. But in that precise moment, all 4 surviving Threxery dreadnoughts began to receive a strange flicker of visual distortion across their internal and external sensor feeds, a single frame. Then, another, an anomaly. Impossible to decipher. It wasn't Earth-beset. It came from nowhere in the system, and yet it was everywhere at once. First, it appeared as static between spectrum bands, then as fragmented lines of movement not recorded by radar, but reflected in internal diagnostics. One Dominion vessel Fury anchor locked onto the distortion and magnified and saw Ida ship a silhouette of negative space, not cloaked, not hidden, but built to exist in sensor absence, a human ship, or something born of Earth, hovering just outside visual field, its surface absorbing light, sound, radiation, even local physics. It didn't fire weapons. It didn't move. It only broadcast a single word into Dominion networks in a compression stream of encoded analog pulses. Observe, inside Chimera Command. The room was silent as ODIN's echo pulsed across the central axis, feeding real-time reactions from the Dominion fleet into human predictive simulations. Shrado's Juno Reyes stood perfectly still, only her eyes tracking the swarm of slow-reacting data that floated mid-air like submerged ink in water. Every movement of the Dominion logged, measured, anticipated. Have they seen it? She asked her systems chief, a woman whose name was classified even within Earth's own intelligence circles. Nodded once, never looking away from the real-time projection of the Fury anchor's collapsing logic grid. They saw the ghost. They don't understand it. They're hesitating. Reyes tilted her head slowly, like a strategist watching a grandmaster's first mistake unfold move by move. Good. Now open grid Echo 9. Let them feel what it means to descend onto a world that stopped fearing extinction. 400 years ago, in orbit, the Threxery dreadnoughts began to experience a strange phenomenon. Their internal climate control systems miscalibrated. Atmospheric containment fields briefly flickered, not enough to cause failure, but enough to suggest intrusion. No alarms sounded, no external threats detected, and yet each ship's crew began to feel it. A slow, crawling sense of being watched, not by heat signatures or optical probes, but by something else, something that recorded not what they did, but why. Meanwhile, beneath the Pacific Trench, Grid Echo 9 pulsed to life. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a fleet, it was a perception construct, an artificial echo field that bent sensor and comms interpretation at the quantum level, built to twist alien logic maps into a spiral of synthetic paranoia, giving false positives of attack, then hiding when they searched for it, feeding enemy battle A is scenarios that humans hadn't fired yet, but were already ready to execute. The Dominion's central network began to misreport to itself. Ship. I think Ship B has fired. Ship B begins recalibration to respond ship. It detects that recalibration as hostile targeting, and in 3 minutes, the Dominion fleet fractured into alert zones with different rules of engagement. They weren't at war, but they were no longer unified on the bridge of the Oblivion Ray. Queen Zelara rose slowly from her living throne, her hands cold on the spines of her command lattice, her jaw tense. "We are being herded," she said, almost to herself, her voice quieter now. "They are feeding us actions like a farmer leads cattle through a path not visible, only felt." Vathala clenched his fists, his voice louder, angrier, with respect. "High Sovereign, we cannot allow them to control the tempo. They have not even shown us their full arsenal. They're bleeding us with shadows." The Queen turned to him, and for the first time, her expression wasn't scorn. It was intrigue. "No. Strategos, they are not bleeding us. They are measuring us. They want to know how long it takes before we break formation, before we fear ourselves more than them." At that moment, the third blade, assigned to descend over South Asia, simply turned away from its descent path. Unprompted, its eye overriding its trajectory for a reason no one could explain. It reported, Visual contact with a mirror fleet in low stratosphere, but there was nothing there, except, deep within the command codes of its neural core, a single new entry had appeared, a command it didn't recognize, in a language it couldn't translate, and yet obeyed. Stand still. From Earth to orbit, the Dominion began to realize they had not come to burn a planet, they had come to invade a strategy, and the battlefield had already been written without them. Asterisk. How many fleets do they have? General Zorn's voice tore across the command line as his dreadnought's orbital sensors scrambled to make sense of the impossibility unfolding around them. I'm tracking 12. No 20 ghost fleets across the upper stratosphere. But the signals are incoherent. My own scanners are contradicting each other, and we are reading atmospheric displacement in every vector of approach. In truth, there were no 20 fleets. There wasn't even one. What the Dominion fleet saw wasn't real. It was projection crafted through humanity's obsidian array, a global defense matrix installed invisibly over the last century, designed not to shield Earth from firepower, but to fracture perception, to corrupt enemy cognition itself, and to fracture trust between sight and action, between command and execution. Asterisk. On the bridge of the Oblivion Ray, Queen X, Elara watched her network of generals, one by one, blink out of synchronization there. Voices began to overlap, commands issued on top of contradictory commands, formations breaking into defensive loops, logic spiraling into chaos as sensor reports conflicted, and artificial intelligence cores rebooted without warning. Collapse the sky, she whispered, her hand tightening around the stem of her throne. This is not war. This is distortion. This is psychological conquest. They are rewriting the battlefield every second and forcing us to fight in hallucinations. Vithala responded immediately, his tone sharpening. We must regain control of perspective. Permission to initiate the Crown's authority beacon. Real space stabilization will clear illusions and reassert Dominion observational hierarchy. Zelara nodded once. Do it. I want this planet burned out of its hiding. I want their illusions turned to dust. In Earth's orbit, the authority beacon detached from the Oblivion Ray like a falling star. It was a device only ever used during the subjugation of sentient nebulae, a weapon not of matter, but of dimension, pulsing waves of stabilizing harmonic fields that collapsed all camouflage, forced out cloaked positions, and overrode falsified constructs in the minds of AI and organic alike as it ignited above the planet. Shimmering fields of white-blue energy cracked through the atmosphere like massive tectonic lenses. It should have worked, but it didn't because Earth had prepared for the authority beacon over 60 years ago. What descended into Earth's sky was a weapon Earth had already copied, dismantled, and countered through a sequence of dark tech relays hidden in the Van Allen radiation belts. The moment the beacon activated, it triggered Earth's black glass protocols, which hijacked the wave frequencies mid-cascade, refracted them through polarized quantum mirrors, and turned the beacon's own field back toward the Dominion ships. The Threxery fleet began to see themselves wrongly positioned, surrounded, fractured. It wasn't a glitch. It was the truth distorted into a lie, and the lie hardened into reflex back inside Chimera Command. Strategos Reyes stepped into the central convergence chamber where her elite war tacticians had gathered, each one staring at real-time Dominion telemetry now flooding their command feeds like a dam breached by insight. Beacon reflection is holding, reported her lead quantum officer, a woman named Amina Voss, who had once designed nuclear thought models for civilian terraforming drones. They've layered AI misinterpretation onto internal logic loops. Dominion ships now perceive all surrounding human positions as overlapping targets. They're trying to reformat their IFF systems, but they're too deep inside the immersion tunnel. Reyes nodded slowly, her tone low and clear. Good. We gave them one honest look at the sky, and they stabbed themselves in the eyes trying to fix It above, in high Earth orbit, one Threxery ship opened fire on another, cautiously at first. A single shot aimed at what its onboard cognition registered as an enemy human strike cruiser. But the other ship, equally misinformed, responded with full shields and activated its auto-retaliation fire sequence. It wasn't war. It was an accidental test of loyalty under illusion, and it spread like blood in water. A duel became a conflict day. Conflict became a skirmish, and in 13 minutes, 2 Threxery dreadnoughts had been severely damaged by their own fleet inside the Oblivion Ray. Queen Zilara rose from her throne for the first time in over 50 cycles. Not as a performance, but because she had begun to feel something she had not known in centuries: uncertainty. "This cannot be Earth," she said softly, eyes fixed on the data collapsing in streams of failed logic. "This cannot be the same species we classified as primitive scavengers, whose last war killed more of their own than all known species in the quadrant. This cannot be them. These are architects of deception. We are not fighting their military. We are fighting their mind." Bethala approached slowly, his voice steadier than before, but lined with something raw beneath asterisk asterisk. "They are reshaping every rule we've ever followed, High Sovereign. If they continue, they won't." Asterisk asterisk X Elara interrupted, but her words lacked certainty this time. "Because we have not yet reminded them what true fear is." She raised her hand, signaling the release of the Dominion's final contingency before planetary raise protocols, a device no species had survived, a fleet core entity only used once before in the memory of her kind, the Crown Warden. A battle moon parked just beyond Jupiter's event horizon. Hidden and charging for this very moment, a single command was issued. From the Queen's neural matrix and across the system, space began to bend as something ancient stirred beyond the gas giant's edge. The Warden had awakened, and it had only one directive: erase all illusion, erase all life, erase Earth. The Queen watched as the stars began to stretch and waver around Jupiter's orbit, a line of fire drawn between arrogance and vengeance, and whispered, "Let's see if they can lie their way through this." Crown Warden activation acknowledged. Phase ignition begins. Gravitational lock acquired on planetary target. Target: Earth. The voice that echoed through the Dominion fleet's encrypted command spectrum did not belong to any organic Threxery, nor to a drone intelligence crafted by standard Dominion protocol. It was something older, something preserved in isolation from Dominion systems to prevent contamination. A voice forged from the raw quantum consciousness that powered the Crown Warden. Their species' most sacred extermination, construct that did not invade planets. It erased them. Queen Zilara stood before the command lens aboard the Oblivion Ray, watching as Jupiter's limb darkened unnaturally, its gravity folding like cloth as a shape began to emerge from its invisible hold. Not through thruster burn or warp, jump through calculated gravitational manipulation, peeling its presence from behind the planet like a shadow stepping out of fire. The Crown Warden was not a battleship, it was an event, an artificial moon armed with planetary rupture cores, gravity shear emitters, and Starford-class singularity projectors, designed to collapse ecosystems, fragment mantles, and sterilize orbit before the debris could ever form memory. Its outer plating reflected no spectrum, because it was not made of matter that obeyed normal physics. Instead, it shimmered in fractal pulses, its hull lined with the bones of extinguished worlds, still coated with the magnetic echoes of civilizations that no longer had names. Within Chimera Command, a new alert filled the room. Not panic, but confirmation. "They've brought the Warden," whispered Director Amina Voss, her voice calm but reverent, as if naming a ghost. "Mass projection confirms 9.8 planetary fracture sequences. Initial countdown: 29 minutes until ignition sweep." Juno Reyes did not flinch, her eyes locked onto the real-time projection. Hovering in the center of the war chamber, the shape forming near Jupiter, slowly aligning, powered not by speed, but by inevitability. So this is their doctrine, she said slowly. When precision fails, erase the chessboard around her. The chamber's outer wall darkened as Odin's core came online. The AI manifesting through a rotating structure of holograms, voice tones, and neural pulses shared between hundreds of underground servers from Greenland to the core of Luna Base. DEFCON Black initiated. ODIN announced, its voice colder than atmosphere. All Chimera projects authorized. Activating fallback protocol. Project Nemesis. Confirming warpath collision with Crown Warden. Query. Shall we respond with kinetic or ontological retaliation? Juno's jaw tensed slightly. Neither. Not yet. Let them think this ends with that weapon. I want it to fire. I want them to believe they've won before they see what we kept buried under Neptune. Because humanity had never intended to outrun galactic warships it had learned to outlive extinction-level threats by preparing for weapons that ended timelines, and so, deep within a classified ice chamber beneath Neptune's crust, codenamed Svalin Black, a machine stirred for the first time in 130 years. It didn't rise in a woke construct never named in official records, built in the final years of the Earth-Mars Exodus War. Forged from stolen alien entropy logic and human desperation, its schematics destroyed after testing, its power source buried beneath the oldest reactor on Pluto. The humans called it Nemesis. It had one purpose, not to attack but to answer, and now, as the Crown Warden aligned its rupture cores toward Earth, charging enough gravitational energy to liquefy half the mantle in a single directed spike, Nemesis initiated its quantum core phase back on the Oblivion Ray. Queen Zilara issued her final command before obliteration. All fleets, fall into silence. No further movement. Let the Warden cleanse this world. Let no false brilliance distract from the final judgment. She sat upon her living throne and closed her eyes. She did not wish to see the earth scream. She wished to feel it die, and the Warden fired, not in beam or flame, not in sound or light, but in folded force, a rip of condensed gravity arcing through space toward Earth, pulling with it a million years' worth of silence. A blade meant to pierce tectonic bones and bleed a planet dry in one single perfect tear, except it didn't land, at least not where they thought. Asterisk, because in the frozen shadows beyond Neptune, Nemesis intercepted the rupture arc mid-vector, not by shielding, not by blocking, but by consuming the gravitational code of the attack, unraveling it, pulse by pulse, decoding it like a story told backwards, and then collapsing it into a singularity before redirecting the event backward along the body. Warden's own path of energy, for the first time in recorded Dominion history, the Crown Warden's weapon turned on itself. There was no explosion, just implosion. The kind of silence that breaks measurement in a blink. The artificial moon folded into its own core, shattering its own laws, leaving behind no debris, only radiation echoes. The Dominion fleet watched as their god weapon vanished without fire, and Queen Zilara opened her eyes. For the first time in her long, exalted rule, she did not speak, because she had no words left. For what she had seen, humanity had not countered extinction, it had devoured it, and still. Earth had not fired a single direct shot, because some wars are won before the enemy ever understands what battlefield they're standing on. High Sovereign, we've lost the Crown Warden. The words were spoken not with panic, but with disbelief. As if the officer reporting could not accept the sound that had just left his mouth, as if his mind refused to thread the sentence into coherence. Silence spread like frost through the command sanctum of the Oblivion Ray, coiling around every Dominion officer, gripping each one with the same frozen realization. Their most absolute weapon, their failsafe, their celestial god engine, had not only failed to fire, It had been consumed. Queen Zilara stood at the forward throne bay, hands clenched behind her back, unmoving, but inside her, the shift had already begun. Not fear, not surrender, but the rare and bitter taste of miscalculation, a taste her lineage had not known in 3,000 years. She did not look at her officers when she spoke. The Earth system should have fractured. The Warden's rupture arc was calculated beyond statistical resistance. Explain its failure. Strategos Vathalas' face was drawn tight, his words measured but strained, as if each phrase had to fight through instinctive denial. Telemetry confirms gravitational arc was destabilized by an external countersurge. The pattern matches no known Dominion technology. The arc collapsed at midspan, then recoiled along its own vector, impact point traced to the Warden's projection shell. It was neutralized. No detonation, no debris. It's simply unmade. Itself. The Queen turned slowly now, her voice so quiet that the data streams silenced themselves in obedience. Are you telling me Earth deployed a counter-gravitational entropy core? Not deployed, Vathala said slowly, his eyes fixed on a data strand unraveling across the main screen. They embedded it. The response signal originated from Neptune's shadow. It was dormant, waiting. It absorbed the attack and reversed the arc's logic string. The humans didn't defend. They baited the strike. The Queen's expression did not change, but something in the room shifted. The Dominion officers began to glance at each other in stolen seconds of uncertainty. Calculating outcomes, they had never imagined they'd needing the silence. Odin watched not from Earth, but from within the Dominion's own systems now. Crown jewel of humanity's military cognition matrix had slipped into Dominion data bands. During the momentary collapse of the Crown Warden's entropy, like a drop of black ink bleeding into pristine crystal inside Chimera Command, Juno Reyes stood before the live tactical feed, her face unreadable, her voice low and composed as always. Odin status? The AI's voice answered without delay. A whisper transmitted across global subterranean servers. Dominion fleet communications partially compromised. Internal threat recognition systems splintered. Neural command threads spliced. They will not trust their own command chain for the next 6 hours minimum. Strategic paralysis is in effect. Reyes nodded once. Then we enter Phase 3, in high orbit. Dominion dreadnoughts hovered in silence, not because they were waiting, but because they did not know what else to do for generations. The Dominion had been an unstoppable force. Every species they had met either bowed or bled, but this was different. Earth did not counter with overwhelming might or sheer violence. It used restraint as its sharpest. Blade humanity did not react. It prepared it. Had anticipated extinction and designed its future around surviving it, and now the Dominion stood not against a civilization, but against a species that had embraced its own vulnerability so completely it had made weaponized survival into an art form in a smaller chamber aboard the Oblivion Ray. Vathala stepped away from the central holotable, alone now. His mind racing, he no longer believed Earth was a primitive backwater species surviving on instinct and emotion. They were planners. Long game. Tacticians, archivists of trauma turned into doctrine. His cum implant flickered. A private line opened. To him by the Queen herself. You understand what this means. Zilara's voice came through like a pressure field, distant but sharp. We underestimated a species that weaponized its own near extinction and called it progress. If they had chosen to respond directly, we would be dust. Instead, they wait. And that is the loudest threat of all. They want us to run, Vathala said. The words leaving him before he could second-guess them. A long pause followed. No. The Queen said finally, slowly, they want us to wonder what else they've hidden before we choose to run. That night, in every corner of the Threxery Dominion, fleets remained locked in readiness. No further orders came. No retaliation was launched. No demands were issued, because Earth had done something the Dominion could not counter. It had earned their silence, and while stars moved quietly above and below, in the void between Saturn's rings, a new object appeared. It didn't broadcast, it didn't move, but its presence was detected instantly by the Threxery's finest sensor suites. A human ship, but not of any known model. Not military, not diplomatic. It simply sat there broadcasting one repeating message in silence. Only one word, again and again, encoded in dozens of frequencies and patterns. Next. Because now the question was no longer whether Earth could defend itself, it was whether Earth had already begun to choose who would be allowed to remain in the galaxy at all. "They're not talking to us," Vathila said aloud, his voice echoing across the command core of the Oblivion Ray. Though no one dared respond, his eyes remained fixed on the unmoving object drifting silently just beyond Saturn rings. Its silhouette wrong. Not hostile, not inert, but intentional. "That signal is a test," he added, "a measure of what we fear, not what they offer." The ship, if it could be called that, had no defined hull, no thrusters, no weapons that any Dominion systems could detect. Yet it shimmered across spectrums like a tear in perception itself. The repeating message came again, across subspace and echo band, encoded in mathematics, entropy markers, and a modulation of ancient linguistic roots. Next. It was not a question of surrender. It was a psychological mirror, the kind of message left by predators who have stopped hunting for need and begun hunting for selection. Queen Zilara listened from her private chamber aboard the Oblivion Ray, her neural links disconnected from her fleet's council for the first time since their campaign began. She stood alone, surrounded by the voice logs of Earth's silence, the calculated precision of a species that had never needed to announce itself with glory. What struck her wasn't the strength. It was the restraint. She whispered to herself, as if speaking the thought aloud would make it less dangerous. "They let the Warden fire. They let it collapse. They let us see ourselves in their traps before tightening them. This is not war. This is vetting. Back on Earth, in a facility that did not exist on any terrestrial map, beneath the Antarctic shelf where tectonic plates intersected like ancient scars, ODIN pulsed at the core of an ancient installation, known only as Acheron Stratos Juno Reyes, stood on the black-tiled command ring as glacial light filtered through artificial semblances, illuminating the walls where names were carved not in pride, but in warning, names of projects never spoken in public, victories never claimed, and weapons never unleashed. The display before her projected real-time Dominion Fleet telemetry. 12 ships had powered down primary systems. 3 had broken formation and begun slow arc retreats toward Jupiter orbit. 2 remained in full alert status, but had disconnected from central Dominion networks. They no longer trusted their own command structures. The disintegration of unity is the beginning of memory, Odin said, its voice no longer formal but poetic, as it often became during psychological interpretation phases. They will not call this a defeat. They will call it a lesson, but the lesson is recursive, and they have no algorithm for humility. Juno Reyes didn't respond right away. Instead, she raised her eyes toward the center of the room, where a suspended kinetic archive displayed the history of Earth's engagements across the stars, all of them classified, most of them never known to the public. Mars collapse, Venus treaty failure, the Screaming Moon encounter, the Bellerophon incident. All survived, all adapted, none. Glorified Earth had never fought for territory. It had survived in preparation for those who did. Asterisk, they'll return, Reyes said, her voice sharp and solemn. They won't believe what they saw. They'll reframe it as anomaly, misfire, manipulation. Because that's easier than admitting we were always beneath their radar and still outplayed them. ODIN pulsed once. Would you like me to send a final message, Strategos? Not yet, Reyes said, stepping down from the platform. her hands behind her back, her eyes cold and deliberate. Let them leave. Let them reassemble their truth. But make sure the message is embedded in every transmission they intercept. Understood? What message? She looked at the projection of the silent ship floating at Saturn's edge, the one word looping endlessly through its spectrum signature, and replied simply, the one they already received up in orbit, aboard the Oblivion Ray. Queen Zilara gave the only order she had left: stand down. Reclaim the Warden's wreckage. Prepare full retreat vector. Vathala turned, stunned. High Sovereign, we leave them unburned? Her eyes narrowed, but not with fury, with realization. We leave them unmeasured, because I do not know where their ceiling ends. I do not know what lies behind their silence. And I will not make war against a species that weaponizes patience like others weaponize gods. And so, the Dominion withdrew not out of fear, but because the cost of misreading Earth again was a price no empress could afford, and as the stars closed around the Dominion fleet, Earth remained unchanged. No missiles fired, no declarations made, no monuments built, only that signaled, that single word looping in the vacuum behind them. Because the real war had not been about territory or destruction or power. It had been about who understood the future first, and humanity had already written the next chapter, while the rest of the galaxy still held a pen without ink. High Sovereign. The transmission came in low, beneath the Dominion fleet's main channels, coded in ionic clearance levels reserved for interspecies protocol breaches. We have confirmation from 3 outer colonies. The human transmission reached beyond this system. It was not only sent to us. Queen Zilara stared at the rotating stellar map in her private quarters aboard the Oblivion Ray. The trails of Dominion expansion glowing like veins of fire in a galactic body she once thought invincible. Now that fire seemed fragile. Vathala entered without speaking, eyes sharp, his demeanor as controlled as ever. But his silence was heavier than protocol required. She turned only slightly, just enough for her voice to reach him. How far? He answered without hesitation. The entire Heliox perimeter. Traders near the Cainus Rift. Even pre-sentient relay buoys near the edge of the erase zone are receiving signal bleed. The word next, repeating, adapting into local lexicons, embedding into civilian AI logic trees. And he paused. It's reshaping how others interpret us. Interpret? She echoed. They're seeing us as the ones spared, he said, tone grim. Not the ones who dominated. There was the reversal once. The Dominion had been mythic, the fire that reshaped history and molded lesser species into order. Now, they were becoming the parable, the story whispered by other civilizations as a warning, not to awaken Earth beneath Europa's fractured crust. In a station thought abandoned since the Martian peace accords, 5 human observers watched the Dominion fleet slink back into deep space. Their screens showed no celebration, no applause, no expression, because humanity's greatest victory was not in winning, it was in not needing to prove it. Captain Neem Aurora stood at the primary console, hands behind his back, his reflection caught in a display of outbound Dominion ship trails. They're not done, he said quietly. Pride that ancient doesn't retreat. It festers, plans, returns. Beside him, one of the sentient protocols, an artificial being named Alice, flickered to life. Its face composed of symmetrical human ambiguity and tones deliberately neutral. They will come again, but not as rulers. As students, Aurora raised a brow, turning slightly. And if they come to learn? We will show them how to survive, Alice replied. And if they come to conquer, we will teach them regret. On the far side of the galaxy, beyond even the Dominion's reach, other eyes were watching silent civilizations, some old, some secret. Some older than war itself. They had known of Earth. They had ignored it. They had watched it burn, fight, fracture, and rebuild over and over. And now they had seen Earth become something else. Not an empire, not a peacekeeper, but a threshold, a species that had mastered loss so intimately. They had woven it into architecture, a species whose greatest weapons were not fleets, but certainty, discipline, and preparation so vast it looked like silence. Some watched with fear, some with reverence, and some with curiosity, because Earth had not attacked it, had simply whispered across the stars, and no one could tell if it was a challenge or a warning, or an invitation in a classified chamber buried under the Pacific Ridge. Juno Reyes stood alone, reading the last of ODIN's collapse reports on Dominion command structure integrity. They were fractured now, not broken. But divided, they would rebuild, they would question, and they would remember the silence more than the threat behind her. A corridor hummed with the quiet breath of vaults, not yet opened. She didn't turn as ODIN spoke again. Voice almost human now. Would it? You like me to delete the signal, Strategos? She waited for a long time, then she shook her head slowly. No, let it play. Let it echo. Let it remind them. Of what? Her answer was simple, that the future is not theirs by right. It must be earned. And we already paid the cost in blood, fire, and forgetting. And far above her, past the clouds, beyond the edge of Earth's defense net, the silent ship near Saturn shifted its orientation by a fraction of a degree. It didn't move. It aligned, facing deep space toward the stars, toward whoever came next. We are being observed, Baithala whispered as he stared into the hololith's pale horizon, the star field glittering with the unmistakable signature of distant pings. Not just by Earth, by others. Silent systems are lighting up across fringe channels. Protocol shifts, pre-contact markers, passive field pulses. This isn't surveillance. This is anticipation. On board the Dominion war carrier Oblivion Ray, the once imperial pride of the Thraxery fleet had grown quieter in its corridors, as if the vessel itself understood its name, no longer inspired fear across the stars, but caution, even reverence. Even Pity Queen Zilara sat beneath the spines of her living throne. But she no longer wore her ceremonial mask of sovereignty. She had removed it the night the Warden collapsed into its own archant. She had not worn it since. You think we were the only ones watching Earth, she said finally, more to herself than to her second. You think our humiliation wasn't already currency traded between star empires who know to remain unseen? Baithala didn't answer, because the truth no longer required validation. He instead gestured to the floating data strand that rippled above the main console, a timeline of Dominion expansion going back 6,000 cycles, now marked by a red fracture. We've sent emissaries to the Aegean Consortium. No response. We sent an echo call to the Veldrum observatories. They returned a mirror signal. No words, only our own broadcast played back with a time shift of 5 seconds. Mockery. Zilara said, no. Baithala answered with a grim clarity. Judgment, and still. Earth remained silent. It did not pursue. It did not issue terms. It did not insult. It had nothing to prove, and that, more than any weapon, burned deepest into the Dominion psyche. Asterisk. Back on Earth, beneath the Chimera Command supergrid, ODIN spoke aloud for the first time in 9 hours, breaking its voluntary quiet protocol, which it enacted during critical response periods to allow human strategic thought to operate unburdened. Its voice echoed across the core chamber where Strategos Reyes sat alone, eyes focused on the star paths being drawn in real time by sublight scans. Reyes, I've received a partial return signal. Not from the Dominion. Not from any known species. Reyes didn't look up yet. From where? ODIN's voice lowered. From a void region once classified as dead space, sector ZK-47, beyond Proxima Protocol reach. The reply came in the same structure as ours. Same structure. Same frequency. Different message. Now she turned. What? Message? Oh, DIM paused. Unusual for a machine built to speak faster than thought. It said, observed, understood, awaiting contact. Reyes exhaled slowly. More memory than breath. So it begins, she said. ODIN continued. We are no longer hidden. We are no longer unimportant. The galaxy is rearranging itself around the idea of humanity. You asked for silence to be our signal. It has worked too well. Across the galaxy, in systems whose names were not yet carved into human memory, voices, convened in languages made of light, motion, and living code. Some were afraid, some curious, some offended. But all Earth was no longer a backwater world clawing its way into relevant sit. At past a threshold the stars rarely permitted it had. Defeated without destroying. Dominated without occupying, broadcast without demand, and now, for the first time since Earth looked upward and asked what lay beyond the moon, the stars began to answer, not in peace, not in war, but in recognition at Saturn's edge. The silent vessel humanity left to haunt the edge of known space finally powered down its one-word signal, next. Ceased, but not because its purpose was done, because it had been heard, and what came next was no longer a question. It was a declaration written across civilizations that now whispered. Earth's name is both myth and marker, because they all knew now. What the Dominion had learned too late, Earth was not to be conquered. It was to be understood carefully, because humanity had not become powerful by reaching into the stars. It had become powerful by enduring what no other species had survived, and turning every scar into strategy. And yet Earth said nothing, because Earth never needed to say anything again until someone else answered the question. The stars were no longer quiet, not because of war, but because of preparation. In every corner of the known galaxy, civilizations once indifferent to Earth's existence had begun to make calculations they never thought necessary, adjustments to treaties, the rebalancing of silent power structures, and the cloaking of entire systems not out of fear of being found, but fear of being noticed at. The center of that shift floated the word that began it all, no longer a transmission, but a concept passed from one species to another, carried in rumor, encrypted in silence, embedded like a virus in cultural thought streams. Inside the Dominion's most secure archive, Valdinari, Queen Zealara stood alone before a sealed obsidian chamber once reserved for defeated emperors, but no death sentence hung over her. Instead, what she faced was worse. The mirror of strategic failure projected around her was Earth's psychological warfare dossier, built over the last 4 cycles by Dominion think engineers. Every intercepted signal, every collapse algorithm, every unexpected human protocol. They forced us to act within our own fears. She murmured, scanning the data trails with a slow, restrained breath. They showed nothing. And in that nothing, we poured our entire doctrine. Lethala stepped beside her, his expression unreadable, his tone low and sharp, and still. We live. That is mercy we did not deserve. She didn't answer immediately when she did. Her voice held the cold finality of revelation. No, that was not mercy. That was theirs to decide. They are not benevolent. They are sovereign over silence. They did not kill us because our death would teach them nothing. And they are a species obsessed with learning, back on Earth. Chimera Command stood silent for the first time in days. All screens were dark. All analysts dismissed. Only Reyes remained, seated in the convergence ring beneath the holographic canopy of the solar system. Odin's core node shimmered faintly nearby, its voice lower than before, more conversational. Strategos. Incoming transmission. Not Dominion. Not known protocol. Tri-band frequency. Origin unknown. Reyes' eyes narrowed, spine straightening. Content? A pause, then, translated into core English. We have seen your silence. We will approach in 10 rotations. We do not wish to dominate. We wish to understand. We wish to speak before the others arrive. Rhea stood slowly, the weight of inevitability coiling around her. They're coming to ask what the Dominion never did. Odin replied. Permission to prepare planetary first contact grid? No, she said quietly. Prepare observation grid. Let them talk. We'll listen. And we'll decide if listening is worth answering. 10 days later, near Neptune's orbit, a vessel unlike any before entered local space. It did not cloak. It did not broadcast threats. It simply held position and waited Earth's response. Silence, but a silence shaped with meaning, a silence that said, you may come, but you will not lead, a silence that carried a history of ashes and empires, of mistakes turned into mechanisms, of survivors who no longer feared death because they had designed around it. And in that silence, a new chapter of galactic history began, not with war, not with peace, but with something far more dangerous. Humanity's attentions. Somewhere, far beyond the map of known systems, a child of a lesser race looked up at the stars and asked a simple question. What is Earth? And an elder answered, a place where mistakes become memory, where weakness is taught until it becomes strength, where silence means they are already 3 moves ahead, and where the last question anyone hears is the only one that matters. And that child understood something they could never unlearn. Humanity didn't conquer the stars. They prepared for them.
Thank you for listening, Alien Chronicles. If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe our channel for more Galactic Saga. And please visit our channel to get new stories every day.